Hello from the floor of the radio show in Orlando, Florida, hot, sticky, humid Orlando, Florida. I'm Scott Fybush here at the Wheatstone booth on the floor of the show in the Bonnet Creek Hilton with my friend Mike Erickson. Hey Mike.
How are you, Scott? Hello everyone out there in Facebook land.
I'm good. Before we get started with all the stuff in the booth, let's talk very briefly about what's happening, because a lot of people have been very concerned in the last few weeks back home in Wheatstone's home base in North Carolina. Everybody's okay there?
Yes, everyone's okay. The factory came through without a problem. We didn't even lose power at the factory. It's high and dry. Some of the staff members, unfortunately, have had some flooding issues to deal with, but no casualties. And Wheatstone's been working with employees on getting them temporary housing and getting them situated and helping them through this.
Been thinking about you guys down there. I know you're eager to get back and get things squared away. So one of the reasons why you've been on the road through all of this is you have a new audio processor that is here in the steel and aluminum and ready for us to take a look at. This is the AirAura X4?
That's right, X4. We are close to pretty much launching it at this point. 2 years ago, we showed this at NAB in Vegas as an idea. The idea kind of grew from there. This year, we showed a mostly finished product on the FM side, and now we have the HD tuner integrated into the processor, as well as the logging feature and the RDS going. So this processor will be able to basically be your, not only do your audio processing at the transmitter site like you would expect out of a processor, but it's also your watchdog, because the HD radio that's built in will automatically change and correlate the analog to digital signal so that you don't get the skipping when you blend from analog to digital and back. You basically tune the radio to the frequency that you're on, you set the correction speed for the initial correction, and once the correction is done, it's set it and forget it. As long as you don't change the station, the processor will keep the analog and the HD aligned. And that's very important, because when you have the skip between the analog and the digital, PPM meters, those people who have PPM meters, you're basically starting over again during your time listening. So this will keep the analog and the digital together and keep the PPM signal in sync when panelists on an HD radio go from analog to digital.
So back up on that a second, because that's a really important point that a lot of people, including me, I think, didn't realize. So if I've been listening along and it's been going in digital for 2 or 3 minutes, and then all of a sudden, as it does sometimes, it drops back down to analog and comes back to digital, you're saying if it's not perfectly time aligned, that the PPM meter is going to reset the length of time that I've been listening, basically?
Based on how far it's off. If it's a little bit off, possibly not, but I know how concerned everyone is with making sure that everything's robust with the PPM signal. This will keep your PPM signal robust during those reception changes from analog to digital. And those changes, as we know, don't always happen in the fringe. They can happen, in the city based on multipath and other situations. So that's where you want this perfectly time aligned. It's a useful tool, especially if you're looking to maximize your PPM encoding in the HD and the FM world.
And a big advantage to have this just in one box instead of using something outboard to try to get that synced up, right?
Right. I mean, the outboard device works. The problem is it's another point of failure. Here, everything's integrated in the processor. It knows the processor. It knows the delay that's going on in the processor, plus the needed delay to get the analog and the digital in sync. It's one unit, and it just makes everything easier.
Under the hood, in terms of what this can do for audio, what's new and special about the X4 compared to all the previous generations?
Well, what we've done is pre-emphasis remastering. And Jeff Keith and I and Steve Dove set out to look at pre-emphasis as not something that's a scourge on the FM dial. In the past, people have used HF limiters and clippers, that are kind of like, that manage pre-emphasis, and that's not what we're trying to do here. We're basically diving into the DNA of how pre-emphasis works with a high-end distortion canceling clipper. And we've set a pre-emphasis curve that's basically our benchmark. And then we get into the actual pre-emphasis that's in the air chain, and we're able to dissect it and be able to manage it correctly. And then we correlate the output of the clipper version of the pre-emphasis with the steady state preemphasis that's basically just there as a reference, and we're able to reconstruct the preemphasis curve with everything properly peak controlled to as however loud you want it. So what you'll notice with X4 is when you turn up the highs, they never get spitty, voices never tear, females still sound nice and smooth no matter how much HF energy you put into the processing.
Very nice. In terms of controllability, obviously you've got some new graphics on the front here to work with.
Correct. We have basically what is a flow chart. So you basically tap on what you want to adjust, and then you can control it from there. There's also a Windows-based app that can run this as well. All the metering is here. You can swipe to see different graphs and see what's going on. So it's pretty robust on the front end as far as being able to. This, if the radio is tuned to an HD signal, you'll be able to see the difference between the correlation between the analog and the digital. So there's lots of tools in here that are also available on the remote app so that you can log into the processor and check it out. Full RDS is also available in the processor, and talk to whatever automation system you want, include iAutomate, and give a little shout out to our cameraman here. And the input is analog, AES, or WheatNet. So it's fully WheatNet compatible. There is a loop point in it, so you can integrate your PPM encoding into the processor instead of having it hang out on the front. So there's a lot of things going on in X4, and we're hoping to have shipping late this year or first quarter 2019 with the final full processing and all the accessory options done.
I know you got people lined up waiting for it already.
Yes, we do. I'm going to be a very busy bee.
Indeed.
Coming up in a few months, both in Europe and here in the United States.
Not like you ever aren't.
Not like I'm not.
Is it different with working with the preemphasis? Obviously in Europe with the 50 microsecond instead of 75, do you have to change the way that you're configuring this over there?
No, it's just basically you go in, you set the preemphasis to 50, and you're done. The processing knows and does the rest, and that can be said for pretty much all the processors is that. You don't really have to change too much. Our processor will adapt differently the way the clipper reacts to preemphasis, knowing whether it's 50 or 75 and maximize, for both of them.
What's the best practice at this point, especially with the HD tuner in it? Do you want to have this now at the transmitter site and control it remotely usually?
With HD, it's always best to have it at the transmitter site. Putting the processing at the studio introduces a whole bunch of other issues with HD about carrying all the other signals across an STL path. With any audio processor, it's always best to have it at the transmitter. And since most transmitter sites now have internet connectivity, you're not going to need accessing it to change the sound on it is no longer a problem. People want it at the studio so I could access it for the sound. That's no longer the problem. Most transmitter sites now have high-speed internet, so there's no reason not to have the processor at the studio unless the site is so remote and disconnected and you have an over-the-air STL. And in that case, then you would probably want to put it at the studio, but in most cases the transmitter site is the best.
Yeah, if you're 40 miles out of town in the middle of the plains with a 2,000-foot tower, hypothetically speaking.
I wonder, yeah, it sounds familiar.
Our thanks to our good friend Dan Hyatt, who has that very tower outside of Denver, who is handling the camera. I'm Scott Fybush here with Mike Erickson. Much more at Wheatstone.com, of course, and we'll be back here live from the booth again tomorrow. On Thursday, Thursday is tomorrow.
Tomorrow is Thursday, yes.
It's all one big blur. Thanks for being with us here at the radio show. We can show you a little bit of
tomorrow will be 107 wins for the Red Sox.
There we go. Thanks for being with us here from the radio show in Orlando.